Okay, I'm gonna give it a few minutes before we get started to make sure that people can hop on. Have you been doing a lot of FAFSA presentations still, or like Michigan student aid presentations during this time?
Oh yeah. They probably mostly have become, well, tip talks now, where we've been going into the high schools and meeting with students one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been
Okay.
doing a lot more of that. But we still definitely have a good handful of financial aid 101s. Like I have one tonight at 6:30. That's just a kind of a statewide open one for non-traditional students.
Okay. So students can just sign up for a one-on-one, or they have to go through their school, or is this something you
Oh,
just
this
offer?
one was like a state specific. So like the
Okay.
state of Michigan sent out a gov delivery to all the different organizations that they're connected to, just letting them know, like, hey, we're doing this tonight. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was the assigned one for that one tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. But typically, yeah, it's like high school counselors or, community partners like yourself will do the event request, and then we'll follow up with you based on which territory you're in.
Okay.
So you fall in my territory, so that's where you got forwarded to me.
Okay. And for, students that may, need that one-on-one support, is there a way for students to find that on their website or they just call you all? I'm just wondering.
Well, usually we defer them to like a college or university.
Okay.
'Cause, like, for example, when I used to work at Schoolcraft or U of M, students it doesn't matter if they're attending that school, a financial aid professional will still help with completing the FAFSA.
Okay. That's
Yep.
definitely something I want to touch on a little bit more is like where do students go for some follow-up questions that might be like more specific.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
okay.
And I can definitely mention too, like the FAFSA has done a great job at improving their resources too. And I can even like, just kind of pull that up on my screen. But there's like a whole chat feature while you're going through it now.
Mhm.
Um, as well as I want to say like their hours are something crazy like 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then they're even open like noon to 5, I think, on Saturdays.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, they've done a great job with improving their services. I've actually, when I was at Schoolcraft, I had some people just because we were so busy with people walking in and short staff that I was like, you can go through it. I can help, at certain points, but if I've got a line, I got to deal with the line. Um, but got someone on the phone with them and they ended up walking them completely through it.
That's great. I
Yeah.
see
So,
that we have a couple of people that hopped on, and we'll get started. More people will probably hop on as we continue to go through. But hello, everyone. So happy that you all are here. My name is Christine Rogers, and I'm work with the Detroit Promise. Some of you all may have seen me on some previous lives or even at a school visit, but I'm happy that you all are here. We are going to be talking about financial aid, and that's such an important part of the Detroit Promise Scholarship. Students must fill out their FAFSA and check to see if they're tip eligible to be able to apply for the Detroit Promise. The Detroit Promise is a last dollar scholarship. So what that means is that we apply your state or federal aid is applied to your account first, and then we cover whatever gap is left after those things are applied to your tuition and mandatory fees. And we also have here Felicia Pelto from Michigan Student Aid, and she's going to go into more details about that stuff because she's the expert on those things. But once again, we're happy to have you here and hope that you take in all this information that she has to share with us. And you can, introduce yourself and get started when you're ready.
yeah. Hi, everybody. As Christine mentioned, my name is Felicia Pelto. I'm from My Student Aid. I am an outreach analyst, so I oversee the Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb areas. And of course, I have colleagues who see all the other counties in the state. But I do have experience working in several different financial aid offices prior to this position, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. So while I am talking from my slides, I am also speaking from experience of letting just little tidbits, what I call little hacks and things throughout the college going experience and how you can find money. So just know, I'm not making it up. I'm not wasting my breath. I'm not just saying it because I'm saying it. I'm genuinely saying it because I've seen it, known it, and experienced it possibly even myself or through others, whether it's the students I helped or even my own peers. So I will go ahead and get started if that's cool with everybody. And then if you've got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I will probably wait more so towards the end to answer them, though, just because a lot of times, you guys are pretty presumptuous or pretty ahead of the game sometimes. Like your thought pops up, and that's usually the next slide I'm going into that'll answer the question. So feel free, like I said, put them in when you're thinking the thought. But I'm going to wait until the end to actually answer it, just in case I'm going to answer it already. All right. And then how was it that I maximized this? I can let you do it.
There we go.
Awesome. All right. So, yep. So I'm coming from my student aid, and the goal, because we are the state of Michigan Treasury, is to hopefully make college accessible, affordable, and attainable. So, financial aid 101, of course. And what I'm going to talk about are just the institutions to consider. So hopefully you're considering all of them, the types of financial aid that you'll be eligible for. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of stop my cam just because sometimes that helps with the I'm going to talk about the FAFSA, more so the importance of it. You might get sick of me talking about it by the end of the presentation just because it is so impactful for everything going forward, such as the federal programs, the state programs you're eligible for. Then I'll talk a little bit about my office, specifically the Michigan Office of Student Scholarships, Grants, and Outreach. Scholarships that we're aware of in your area, which if you actually go to our website when I suggest it later, does show the Detroit Promise as one of those scholarships, as well as I mentioned Q&A at the end. Oh, and I'm sorry, this looks a little funny there. Well, I do apologize. I do see my slides are a little funny looking. So real quick for this one, I think I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. Let me actually open this particular presentation up.
Okay, I'll just remove that and you can just share.
All right, give me 1 second here. Just doing a quick flip around of things. Dun, dun, dun.
Hello, once again, for anybody viewing, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll get to those a little later if they're not already answered by time we finish.
All right, perfect. Can you all see this okay?
Let me, which one is, I think this one is the correct one.
Oh, no, the other
one. Or maybe
one.
it's the other one.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So what institutions you're considering? So hopefully you're considering all three, but you'll notice some very specific things about each. First, I always like to bring up that first line specifically. You'll notice the cost of attendance, average, that's what COA stands for, is cost of attendance. And between, community colleges and then the public college and universities, you'll notice right away that it doubles, right? You'll see this kind of 12,735, and then it goes to about 25,000. And then from there, you'll notice it kind of doubles again from 25,000 to 50. I'll just round to 54,000 for private colleges or universities. And so the main thing is the difference between the type of degree you're going for during those. So at your community college, I always like to say, think of it, as being community oriented. So they're always trying to be affordable on some level. So that's why they're going to be, kind of the cheapest. But cheap does not always relate to quality. I always say keep that in mind, especially when it comes to higher education. When you are looking at a community college, you're looking at anything that's a 2-year degree and under. So your associate's degree, certificates, or licensing programs. So like I said, anything 2 years and under. But if you're thinking about getting your bachelor's degree, that's when you're looking at these last two, a public college or university, as well as a private college or university. You're typically getting like your 4-year degree, which is your bachelor's, or even a graduate program. So like your master's, maybe your doctorate or PhD even. There are some private and public colleges and universities that have associate and certificate programs, which is why you kind of want to consider going to a community college if you're thinking about getting that certificate or licensing program, because often it's going to be less expensive for you to get it at your community college. If you're thinking about going out of state, I often compare that to the private college and university costs because it is very similar. It's going to be the most expensive. And again, it's just a matter of what you're going for, But I often like to use the example of, if you're thinking about being a nurse, and let's say you're just thinking about your RN, which is a 2-year degree, it's literally this difference. If all 3 schools have an RN program, which is a 2-year program, it's literally the name of the school, the reputation of the school, and ultimately how much you decide you want to pay for it. Because I have definitely seen someone pay, the community college amount for an associate in nursing, as well as the public or private university amount. But it's really just up to you. But I always like to joke and say, a nurse is a nurse is a nurse. When we go to the doctor, we don't stop and say, hey, how'd you get your education? Did you get a community college degree, or did you go to, the University of Michigan or Michigan State before you, before you worked here? Because at the end of the day, it just may be a matter of how much are they going to be paying back when you really think about it. But they're still just as educated and professional as any other nurse. So then, considering the sources of financial aid, as I mentioned kind of in the overview, there's federal, state government, which is where I hail from, the institutions and colleges themselves, as well as private third party, which are different associations, foundations, clubs, employers, churches, unions. If you think about it, right, the Detroit Chamber and Detroit Promise is kind of one of those private or third party kind of association, because they are a foundation that exists to assist students with going to college, given that you're meeting certain criteria. The colleges and universities themselves oftentimes will have funds for either incoming students, as well as their own students that are currently attending, as well as students that are not necessarily graduating from college, but even transfer students. So if you decide to do the community college route and then go to a four-year university, oftentimes they'll have specific scholarships just for you transferring, just for you being a high school graduate. And then while you're in that school, for you being a current college student and pursuing your degree. But I often say, think about anywhere you live, work, eat, or play. So anywhere there is money exchanged, you could potentially get a scholarship. I recently learned about a scholarship for students being a caddy, and it's like a full, I believe it's a full cost of tuition scholarship that I overheard a student share with me. And it was, through the Facebook that I saw that opportunity through, my connections. But I thought it was a pretty great opportunity. And I thought of all things being a caddy, which not only is an opportunity to meet different people of different walks of life, and you're kind of meeting, if you think about it, those country club people. So, they're going to have probably a pretty diverse background of experience. But then from being a caddy or for being a caddy, you got this great full cost of attendance scholarship, which is amazing. So again, anywhere money is exchanged, there could be an opportunity to earn a scholarship of some sort. And then just to elaborate a little further on the different types of financial aid. So I like to break it down as free money, earned money, and borrowed money. So free money are those scholarships and grants. Scholarships we often think of as merit-based, which, is grades and scores based. But I just mentioned one just based on work ethic, which is that caddy scholarship I was mentioning. Grants are considered need-based. So I do like to remind students that, you have to do the FAFSA to be considered for grants, regardless if you or your family think you'll be eligible for the FAFSA. Oftentimes, even institutional grants that you could be eligible for will require the FAFSA. As well as this earned money comes from the FAFSA, which is a work-study program, which is money you earn as a result of working at a job. And then borrowed money, I know that we often don't like the idea of loans, but I do need to educate you about them because they are a type of financial aid. So if you don't have enough money to cover that full cost of attendance, schools are going to offer you some student loans. And so I just want you to know that loans do have to be repaid with interest, and that when you accept or decline a student loan, it is important to consider whether you'll earn enough money after college to pay it off and be able to manage your debt. So I'm definitely going to educate you a little bit on that a little further later on. But there is the FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And so this is essentially what the FAFSA form looks like. And if you're new to the FAFSA, you would click here. Once you get into it, it's going to ask you whether or not you have an FSA ID to log in and complete it. And if you don't, there's a link there for you to go ahead and create your FSA ID. And then I do also have just a short video that I want to go ahead and share with you. And I believe I have it up on this screen here. So give me 1 second. And I'll just kind of move it in to view.
If you're interested in financial aid for college or career school, you're going to need to fill out the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. It takes most people about 30 minutes to complete online, and the best part, it's 100% free, and it provides you with access to grants, loans, and work-study funds from the federal government. And many colleges and states use FAFSA information to provide their own college or state financial aid. Before you fill out the FAFSA, it's a good idea to create your FSA ID, a username and password that lets you electronically sign your FAFSA and gives you access to various websites related to federal student aid. And here's an important tip. If your parent is providing information on your FAFSA, he or she will need his or her own FSA ID. Visit studentaid.gov/FSA ID for more information. Your FAFSA can be completed online at FAFSA.gov, and help is provided throughout the online application process. You will need to fill out the FAFSA each year you are in school because your financial situation may change. Plus, you may be able to automatically transfer your tax data from the IRS, making the application even quicker to fill out. Each state and college or career school sets its own deadline for the FAFSA, so it's best to get it done early. Since some of the funds are available on a first-come, first-served basis, you don't want to miss out. Now that you know about the FAFSA, you might be asking, well, how much money will I get? Your college or career school will do the math, and there's a simple formula that they use. First, the college takes your cost of attendance, which is the total amount it will cost you to go to that school. Your cost of attendance will vary from school to school. Then, the college subtracts your expected family contribution, or EFC. Your EFC is based on information provided in your FAFSA and will not change based on the school you attend. However, the EFC is not necessarily the amount of money you will have to pay. Basically, your cost of attendance minus your EFC equals your financial need. Your college uses your financial need and other information to determine how much financial aid you can receive. See? Pretty simple. If you have questions or need more information.
And I will often cut that just a little short because, it's a couple minutes of unnecessary talk. So, but again, this is what the FAFSA itself looks like. And the main things that we want you to know and be aware of is that you can complete it online as well as through a mobile app. You do want to avoid being scammed because the FAFSA is free. So if you're going somewhere on a website and it wants you to pay for it, then you're in the wrong place. You want to go in the other direction. As the video mentioned, it must be completed every year. So from my experience, I have seen students in their sophomore year not have their FAFSA completed and miss out on thousands of dollars. From my experience at the University of Michigan specifically, I've seen students miss out on anywhere between $8,000 to $13,000 in U of M grant monies just because they never did their FAFSA and they're excruciatingly late in terms of doing it by the time they realized it because their bill was already due. So you always want to make sure that you set up a reminder in your phone to complete the FAFSA October 1st. That's the earliest that you can do it. And because, as it mentioned in the video, things are first come, first serve, we can't just, kind of print money as an institution. And so you want to make sure that you do that as soon as possible because the sooner you do it, the more funds you're considered for. So if you're graduating this year, you should have hopefully already done your FAFSA as of last year. But when this coming year, assuming that you're in college, you're going to be a freshman, right? You're going to be in the middle of a semester when it comes to needing to complete this FAFSA, just like you were in the middle of high school. So you'll want to get used to that routine and knowing that pretty much your first semester in the fall, you need to complete your FAFSA for the following year. So that expected or estimated family contribution, that is after you've completed the FAFSA, you're going to receive notification of this EFC number. That number is what the schools use to determine what kinds of financial aid you're eligible for. Keep in mind, this isn't the amount of money that you guys have to pay up front or anything like that. It's simply what the schools use to determine how much money you're eligible for. And the variables that impact your EFC include yours, so student and parent income, family household size, the number in college, as well as amount paid in taxes. The student's not going to be living with me, at least that's what the parent will say.
1 second, I apologize. You were accidentally removed from the stream, so I don't think they heard like that last couple of beginning seconds of what you said.
Oh, okay. Of this slide or last?
Of that slide that
This
you
one
were
here?
just on. It was literally like the first couple of seconds.
Oh, okay. So a lot of students give me questions, students and parents, families, where they'll say, hey, my student's not going to be living with me anymore. They're going to be living on their own, going to college, or the student's like, hey, I plan on getting a job, working full time, and going to school. I'm not going to be getting any financial support from my parents. And essentially the government has made a very clear distinction on whether or not if you can answer yes to any of these situations, then that is something that you would be considered independent for. If you answer no to all these situations, then you are considered a dependent student. So essentially, in short, if you're not over the age of 24, married, have children or dependents other than your spouse, that of course you claim taxes for, are a graduate or professional student, veteran, or a current member of the armed forces, experienced some time in foster care, an emancipated minor, which I like to joke and say, hey, if you argued with the government for independence from your parents, which is what emancipation is, then they're in agreement with you. If you've experienced any kind of homelessness or at risk of being homelessness, keep in mind that does require documentation. You can't just say, hey, I'm homeless, and they'll just automatically take your word for it. Or if you have some other unusual circumstance that does require some kind of documentation. But I also still like to remind students, don't make big life-altering decisions such as getting married to someone you may not be sure of, or having children with someone you may not want to be your baby daddy or baby mama, just because you're looking for some kind of free education. That is not worth it, and it does not guarantee that you will get financial aid for school, at least not to cover everything. And so you might be wondering, which parent should I use on the FAFSA? So
before you move on, I just have a question.
Sure.
So how does being dependent or independent affect the FAFSA? What does that mean?
It's essentially the difference of if you're independent, they look at just your income and information, or your spouse's if you're married. If you are considered a dependent student, then this is where parental information is included.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no problem. And so most students naturally are dependent students. If you had a parent that came to parent-teacher conferences, dropped you off at school, you had a household that you weren't maintaining all by yourself on your own, most students are considered dependent. And so they require a parent's information at least. But you might be curious based on your parents' situation, whether or not who to include. So if your parents are married to each other, naturally you'll include both parents. But you only need one parent to complete the FAFSA. And then they would essentially put both of their information on there because you only need one parent's signature for it at the end of it. If your parents are legally separated or divorced, then you'll use the parent that has custody over you. If your parent is remarried to a step-parent, then that parent and your step-parent's information is required on the FAFSA. And then if your parents were never married and not living together, again, you'd use just the custodial parent, so who has custody over you. And then if your parents were never married, but yet living together, essentially, running the household together, then you would use both parents' information. And so I mentioned a couple slides ago under that independent slide that in some special circumstances, you could be eligible for a reevaluation of your financial aid, but it does require documentation. School or college does consider that professional judgment. And so that's essentially what you're asking for. If you have a special circumstance that doesn't fit, maybe you do say no to all the dependency questions on there, but you've got a unique circumstance that doesn't allow you to complete the FAFSA the way it's intended. So some special circumstances that are common are change in income or household size. So that could be as a result of marriage or divorce. Maybe the family increases or decreases in household size, or change in income, as we all experienced or heard due to COVID these last few years. So that would be a reason to mention, hey, there's been a change in compared to the information that's being provided or asked for here. And then dependency overrides due to family breakdown. In an unfortunate circumstance of having some form of abuse, neglect, or homelessness. But they do all require some form of documentation or some form of supporting documentation to say that that's happening. Not to diminish that anything is happening in that situation, but unfortunately, sometimes the disagreement with a parent could be considered, to the student can feel like abuse just by not getting their way. So not to diminish that, but simply, schools have to have some legal supporting documentation, whether that be from, a counselor, a school counselor who might be aware of the situation, a social worker, or, someone of that nature, even a doctor, right? That might be aware of some things going on in the household. And then assuming that you got through the FAFSA, these are the different federal aid programs that you would be considered for. And so there is the federal Pell Grant, which is the largest federal grant that exists. The Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. And this one is often one of those first come, first served kind of grants. So if you don't do your FAFSA early, schools run out of this fund quite quickly. There's the Federal Work Study, which is that one I mentioned you earn as you go. Then there's the Teacher Education Assistance for Higher Education grant. So if someone is thinking about being a teacher, then this may be a grant that you would be interested in. And schools would determine your eligibility, one, if they participate in this grant program, but also two, if teaching is the profession or program that you're signed up for. There's the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant for students and or parents that served in that capacity or in those areas. And then federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized, as well as federal direct plus loans. So these last three are considered loans. And so keep in mind that everything that says grant on the end, or everything, from this Iraqi and Afghanistan service grant and up, is considered a grant and does not need to be repaid. And these items are considered loans and they do need to be repaid. And then just mentioning some Pell Grant basics. So again, you have to complete the FAFSA in order to be considered for it. And typically families that make less than $26,000 automatically receive a 0 EFC, which means that their college-bound student would receive the maximum federal Pell Grant funding. And so for this academic year that's coming to a close, the maximum Pell Grant was $64.95. And so I like to mention this just to say that even the poorest of us, if you consider the cost of attendances at the very beginning, where it was like $12,000, $25,000, and $54,000, even the poorest of us still have to put some skin in the game in terms of seeking out other resources or other scholarship opportunities to supplement and assist us in going, right? Unfortunately, just one resource, which is that the federal government and this one largest grant, may not be enough to get us through it all, especially if you are thinking about going to a four-year institution. You've got to kind of be in that mindset of stacking your awards and looking for additional resources. Work study program, I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but this is part-time employment to help with college expenses. And so typically what it is a grant that will show up on your financial aid award letter, and it's the amount you can earn up to in that academic year. The federal government does have a requirement that you don't work any more than 20 hours a week. And when you think about it, that's for your protection. Because if you're a full-time student and you're going at least 12 credit hours, it is assumed that for every hour you're in class, you are studying for the equivalent of 2 hours outside of that class. So if you think about it, you're in 12 credits, you're in class for at least 12 hours. They expect you to study then 12 times 12, or 12 times 2 is 24. So if you add those 24 hours that you're supposed to be studying for class plus the 12, right, that is 32 hours. I think my math is right, something like that. But 32 hours roughly. So if you think about that, you're just shy of a full-time job, which is often 40 hours a week. So then if you consider the fact that you're doing work study, a maximum of 20, and a lot of times students assume that they'll have all this time to like just study while they're studying and do homework while they're doing the job. But you got to keep in mind that this is earned money. So just like any other form of employment, you've got to find the job, apply for it, interview for it, get offered the position, and accept that position because it is something that you can professionally place on your resume. And depending on the job you find, it could be directly related to your form of your actual work of study. So that's why they call it work study, because you're working and hopefully while studying for one, while being in college, but hopefully it's related to the field that you're interested in. And it's offered to students who essentially demonstrate need, which means those students who are grant eligible. And then when it comes to federal student loans, I mentioned earlier there are 3 kinds, but I want to make sure that you're educated on those kinds so that you're, hopefully if you do have to borrow, you borrow the best kind and not the worst kind and all that good jazz. So all these student loans are eligible for undergraduate students, which are what you're going to be until you are working on a master's degree. Then there's the subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus. The subsidized amount is considered a need-based loan. And so I often like to say this is when the government is subbing in by paying the interest while you're enrolled in school, at least half time. And so if, for example, you borrow $3,000, it stays $3,000 until 6 months after you graduate or drop below half time. The unsubsidized is the complete opposite, which means the government is not subbing in for you and you're responsible for interest at all periods. So even while you're in school, the moment it pays towards your college expenses, it is accumulating daily interest. So that's the one I always say, unless you absolutely have to, don't borrow it. And the amounts of these change as you, excel through or progress, I should say, through your degree program. And then if you're going to a pretty expensive school like that private or independent college, you're very likely to see them put on a Parent Plus loan. And so if you're looking at your award letter, you're typically going to see any grants, scholarships, work study, subsidized loan, unsubsidized, and then they may offer something known as a Parent Plus loan. And this Parent Plus loan means that it is in the name of the parent. They are borrowing this on your behalf while you're in school, and they cannot transfer this to you later as the student. It will always be under the parent's name. But one of the quote unquote hacks that I like to share is that if this is an option that they offer, I often say if you do have more than one parent, because even if, let's say, you only have a one-parent household, but you're aware of the other parent and have somewhat of a relationship with them, I always say then pick the parent or ask the parent who may feel as though they don't have the best credit, apply, because this is actually the one loan that is credit-based. And so when a parent isn't automatically eligible, it'll actually have the option to seek a third-party cosigner. And when they're in that position, they can choose not to go with a cosigner, and that then would open eligibility for you to get additional sub and unsubsidized loan under your own name. So just kind of an FYI. And then some other factors to consider when taking out a loan. So one of those factors is to make sure that you're not exceeding 10% of the monthly take-home pay during your first year post-graduation. So what that means is, let's say in this scenario, 4 or 5 years into the future, and you plan on making around $60K a year. $60,000. And in my example, I'm not using taxes. We're in this imaginary world that math is easy, so taxes aren't there. And so your take-home pay for a $60,000 salary or income would be $5,000 a month. So if $5,000 is what you plan on bringing home, 10% of that would be $500. So you would want to make sure that your loan payment doesn't exceed that $500 if $5,000 is what you plan on bringing home. Now, I often suggest here that students go to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics website. So that's bls.gov. And that's the federal government's literally Bureau of Labor and Statistics about all jobs and career paths. And what they do is they collect all this statistical data to say, on average, this is how much, let's say a psychiatrist or a school principal or a teacher, and in even a given area. So if you are looking at staying in Michigan, or if you're looking at going to Minnesota, just throwing a random state out there, then you are able to investigate what income you would anticipate making. And so sometimes that's actually the most common mistake that people make, is that they actually have no idea what they're actually planning on making when they graduate. And so, they just go to school, I'm going to be this. And then come to find out it's not until after they graduate and start looking for jobs that it's not as much as they thought it would be. So that's a great way to investigate what career paths could potentially warrant for income. So another way of kind of saying this is making sure that your total loan debt doesn't exceed your first year annual salary after graduating. So going with that same example, if $60,000 is what you think you'll make your first year graduating, don't borrow more than $60,000. Okay? Because essentially the hope is that you graduate with $60K. And if you did, for whatever reason, have to borrow that, that $60,000 to get through college and graduate with your degree, that would still be an affordable payment. And you would still be able to hopefully increase your salary over time. And that loan, as you're paying it off, would be decreasing over time, right? And we want that positive, inverted relationship. And then some other things to consider. I do always say, federal loans are going to be better than any private loans that you get, especially because interest rates are locked and they're not allowed to just suddenly increase on you, which a lot of private loans are variable. So a lot of times they'll start out at some great percentage, like 1 or 2%. And then as soon as interest rates change, which are happening in the current year right now, as a result of, COVID and them not increasing interest rates these last 2 years. So now those people are experiencing a spike, as well as anybody with a variable credit card rate. So it's mindful or just smart to stick with things that are fixed, which are federal government loans. And then some other just loan repayment and forgiveness options that exist only with federal loans. There's public service loan forgiveness, which I believe is after 10 years of working in a civil service job, you are eligible for forgiveness on what's left. But you do have to have been on either an income-driven repayment plan during that time, or at least have made, continued to make your payments and things of that nature. Teacher loan forgiveness is for those that, again, are considering being teachers and then decide to work in a particular area. And I believe it's like a high need area. But again, teacher loan forgiveness, if that's your passion and plan, that is an opportunity. And then there's also income-driven loan repayment. So if for some reason you don't graduate with the salary you anticipated, so that $60K you thought, and you come out and maybe you're only making $50 or $45, we'll say, just to kind of cut it a little lower, you can send in your pay stub to the federal government and they will adjust your loan payment so that it's affordable and not necessarily, taking from the food off your table. And then I want to talk about, of course, my Office of Student Scholarships, Grants, and Outreach. This year, we were able to appropriate over $140 million for 7 different state financial aid programs, all of which are for undergraduate students, which means you. Most are need-based, so that means they all require the FAFSA, or most of them do. And our program details, eligibility requirements, and fact sheets can be found on our website at michigan.gov/mystudentaid. Oh, and these, sorry about that, just moved a little fast. These are our different state aid programs. So the Michigan Reconnect at the very bottom there, that one probably is not relevant to you because it's for people 25 and older. But the other 7 that I mentioned, so Children of Veterans Tuition Grant. So if you have a parent who served in the military but is considered disabled or had passed during their service, you could be eligible for a tuition grant. There's Fostering Future Scholarship for students who have experienced time in foster care in Michigan. Michigan Competitive Scholarship is one that requires that you have a 1200 SAT score at least and have completed your FAFSA and show need based on the FAFSA. The Michigan Tuition Grant is kind of the sister to the Michigan Competitive Scholarship, but it specifically helps with private or independent colleges, whereas the Michigan Competitive Scholarship is at the public colleges and universities, as well as your community colleges. Police Officers and Firefighters Survivor Tuition Grant is similar to the Children of Veterans. If you had a parent that served as a police officer or firefighter and became disabled or passed in the line of duty, you may be eligible for that. Then there's the Tuition Incentive Program, affectionately known as TIP, that you may be eligible for, and I will be talking about that actually here in the next couple slides. And then Future for Frontliners, that one is kind of long past due. Anyone who wanted to apply for that, that was, I think, early COVID, that Governor Whitmer made that eligible and then kind of closed it down pretty quick. So to be eligible for these programs, you, of course, do have to be a Michigan resident, a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or approved refugee status, have a free application for federal student aid completed, use it at an approved Michigan college or university, so you cannot take it out of state with you, enroll at least half-time. I doubt any of you have student loans to be in default, so that's something, again, specific to Michigan Reconnect. But you do have to graduate with your high school diploma, certificate of completion, or its recognized equivalent, and you have to meet satisfactory academic progress standards at the institution, which essentially means, you have to pass your classes, be going to your classes, and then if you run into trouble, be sure to talk to your financial aid office as well as your professors to see what you can do before essentially it's too late. Because if you do, drop below that 2.0 or whatever your program requirements are, or fail too many classes, or stop attending, you have that opportunity to lose your eligibility for various scholarships and grants. And there is the FAFSA deadline as of May 1st. So it's normally March 1st for Michigan Competitive and Michigan Tuition Scholarships. But for this year specifically, they extended it to May 1st to hopefully help students that are late getting to the FAFSA get it done and still give you the opportunity to get those scholarships. And the way we know where to send your money is essentially based on what Michigan school you put in your FAFSA. So let's say, for whatever reason, maybe you put Ohio State, you're thinking about going there first, but you decide to go to, and I'm just throwing schools out there, Schoolcraft is listed, MSU is listed, and they may not be number 1, but they're later in your list. We're going to look at the first Michigan institution you have listed in your FAFSA. That's where we're going to send your money. So the way you could update that, if that's not the case, is to go to update your FAFSA, update your school. You can also create an MISSG student portal, as well as give us a call at our customer care center number here listed, which is also going to be at the very end for you to give us a call, where we can essentially look in and confirm what school we see that your money's going to be sent to and essentially send it to the correct one.
So does the school I'm attending have to be the first school, or just has to be on the list, just for clarification?
It essentially just has to be on the list, and it's going to be the first Michigan school we see. That's the one we're going to assume, because we're assuming that you're putting them in based on rank order.
Okay.
Yep. So as long as it's essentially the first Michigan school listed, that's where we're going to send it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And then, of course, there is the Fostering Future Scholarship, as I mentioned. So students who have experienced any kind of foster care in Michigan on or after the age of 13, you could get up to $3,000 per academic year to assist with tuition fees, books, supplies, room and board, which is food. But as I mentioned, up to $3,000 per year. And so we're going to have this application. It used to have a deadline of August 1st of every year, but now they've actually made it a rolling application of a first come, first serve basis until the funds are no longer available. And then the tuition incentive program, students are identified as eligible for this program if you were on Michigan Medicaid, if you have or had Michigan Medicaid for 2 out of 3 years, 24 out of 36 months, between the ages of 9 and high school graduation. So if you think about it with that math, you could be eligible as early as 11 or 12 years old. And so there's no special application needed, but to ensure you remain eligible for it, you must complete high school or its recognized equivalent by the age of 20. If you decide to go to early or middle college, you got to make sure that you graduate from that before the age of 21. And then you want to begin using your benefits, which means make us pay for some classes within 4 years of high school completion. And even if you're not sure or you don't know, what you want to do, I often say, just to make sure that you don't lose your benefits, make sure that you attend and take at least 6 credits worth of classes within those 4 years of graduation. Because then once you do that, your benefits aren't forfeited until 10 years after that first payment. Okay. So if you don't do anything, they're forfeited after 4 years, which unfortunately I've had the unfortunate opportunity of letting a student know that they were just outside of their window by deciding to enroll in college in their 5th year. But had they just taken 2 classes within the last 4 years, they would have still been eligible for their funds.
I was tip eligible and I did not find out about it until I was graduating. And at that point, it was already too late because, like you said, I didn't use it within that time.
No. Yeah, and that's just money missed out on, unfortunately.
Yes.
I wish that, sometimes they could, retroactively put it there, because that'd be some nice way to help with any loan payments one might owe or.
But now students don't have to fill out an application, correct?
Nope, it's there's no application or certification needed. Whereas back in our day, there was a certification process that we had to do in order to get eligible to maintain our eligibility for the funds.
So as long as I'm eligible, it will be automatically applied if I'm going to a tip eligible school.
It should be. It should be. And if it's not, it just might be a matter of either inquiring with that financial aid office so that they can investigate. And essentially when they investigate, it'll tell them whether or not you're in the system as a student. And then they usually can reach back out to you and say, hey, you need to reach out to my student aid and let them know you're coming here. Because oftentimes it's that they're listed at a different school. If for some reason the school doesn't put it on there, the student has to identify the school as their preferred place.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then it does work in 2 phases. So phase 1 covers a lot of things. So let me break it down. So in phase 1, and which is your best bang for your buck, to be honest, is going to your in-district community college. If you go to your in-district community college, we cover your full in-district tuition. So if you're considered a resident, we will cover that full resident cost of tuition and up to $250 in mandatory fees per semester. Okay. Then if you decide to go to an independent or private college, because those are kind of one and the same, we'll pay what is the average community college in-district rate. And we research that average every single year. So for this current year, it's 118. So let's say the average rate at that school is like, 128. The difference would be that $10 per credit hour that you would be responsible for out of pocket if you don't have other funds to assist with that. And then up to $250 still in the mandatory fees per semester. And if you go to a public university, and this phase one is what I call your associate and certificate degree phase. So even though you go, let's say, to University of Michigan or Michigan State, because those are considered a couple of our public universities, you have to be enrolled in a certificate or associate degree program in order to utilize phase one. So if you're at the University of Michigan, let's say, and you're going into political science, but they have you enrolled in a bachelor's degree, because I'm not aware that the University of Michigan even has associate degrees or certificates, then you actually will not be able to utilize phase one. It would be like, in this kind of scenario, if for some reason, let's say you were going into, I believe it's veterinary science that Michigan State has, or it's like veterinary tech, that's an associate's degree that I'm aware that they have. There, and with that particular degree, because it's an associate degree program, we would pay the lower level resident rate, which is what you'd be at anyway, right? You'd be a freshman, sophomore. So that's the freshman, sophomore level that we're going to pay at your full tuition, and then $250 in mandatory fees. So kind of the, issue that sometimes happens is that students will often go to, a public Michigan university, and they'll enroll right into a bachelor's degree program. And when you do that, you're not able to utilize phase one. And so if you do decide, let's say, to go to your community college and work on a certificate, that certificate does need to be a minimum of 24 semester credits in at least one academic year to qualify for this program. And so typically one academic year is considered at least 30 weeks of instructional time, which is 2 semesters, because usually it's 15 or 16 weeks a semester. So then phase two is once you get into your bachelor's phase. And so, as I mentioned, if you went to MSU or state and you got right into your bachelor's degree program, you're not going to see TIP until your junior, senior year then, specifically because phase two covers tuition assistance at that bachelor's level. And so this is where you get $500 per semester in your 4-year program at a Michigan degree granting college or university. And it's assumed that because you're in your junior, senior year, that you've only got those 2 years left, which is roughly, 24 months. But we still give you an additional 6 months to make sure that you utilize phase two, because you do have to complete within 30 months of completion of phase one requirements. And then I just want to briefly talk a little bit about the MISSG student portal. And so you can go to this portal. Oh, my apologies. One click too many. I know there's this QR code, and I know one of them are off. I apologize if it's this one. But you can go to michigan.gov/MISSG, and that's going to take you to create a portal. In order to create your account, though, you have to have your social security number, because unfortunately, when we get those records, sometimes from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, they may, change a number, flip a number by accident. You just got to consider there is always human error, sometimes when typing. And so you do need to have your full social security number. And then we either have to have a current year FAFSA, where you have to have one completed, or a TIP record in our system in order for you to be able to create a student portal. One or the other, because we have to essentially have something to attach to create that portal, which would be either a FAFSA or a TIP record. And so what you can do in MISSG is you can apply to various scholarships that we offer. So the Children of Veterans Tuition Grant, Fostering Future Scholarship, as well as the Police and Firefighters Survivors Tuition Grant. You can receive important communication from us regarding your rewards and eligibility. You can update your college on file. So as I mentioned earlier, if for some reason, let's say you would put, Schoolcraft, MSU, Michigan State, and you're like, you know what, I'm actually going to go to OCC. Then you can go into your portal and change that school for our records. So then we will send your money to that correct school. You can also update your contact information so that you make sure that we always are sending the right information to the right address and not, at home to your parents, and they may not be paying attention to your mail. You can also view your eligibility status. So you can see that kind of ticker on your tip eligibility, as well as your payment status. So you can see how much we sent and where and when we send it. And then you can also email us through the portal. And the convenience of that is just the fact that, if you give us a call, we're always going to say, hey, what's your name, last four of your social, that kind of stuff. But when you email us from the portal, it's already connected to your account. So there's not much we need from you other than your question. And then you can also check out a lot of these resources on our website, publications, detailed program information, more information regarding the FAFSA, as well as you can connect with us on social media. There is a scholarship search tool that I'm going to share here in just a moment, but we also talk about scholarship searching best practices. So how to find scholarships, even those national scholarships that you may be eligible for and might be just, a little hesitant to apply for because you're like, oh, it's national, I might not be eligible. But in my career so far, I've had a good handful of students who have gotten those big national scholarships. And oftentimes it's just perseverance. It's just doing it and sharing, your story, your information, and giving them what they're asking for, as well as signing up for the portal on our website. So this is our my scholarship search self-service tool. Here you can go to our website, and if you go to michigan.gov/mystudentaid and you click on the students and families tab, you'll see my scholarship search self-service tool. And here you can essentially pick your county, and based on your county, it'll generate, you can click to generate a PDF, but below this area, it'll actually generate a list of all the scholarships that we're aware of based on the county you live in. And so if you live in a Detroit Promise Zone, that will be one that would pop up as well. And I'm going to kind of start to close here, just letting you guys know that My Student Aid is all about trying to make college accessible, affordable, and attainable. But we do want you to connect with us on social media, and our handle is @MyStudentAid. The multi-benefits of connecting with us there is that we will give you all kinds of tips and tricks to make sure that you're up to date on any new deadlines when it comes to the state awards, the FAFSA itself. We're going to let you know when it's the best time to file, if we're aware of any additional opportunities and scholarships. So we are on, as you saw, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. But of course, I'm going to hang out with for questions if you guys have any. But I always suggest taking a screenshot of this, so then you've got our phone number and our email. But real quick, I just want to pop over and say thank you. And I will leave that up for a minute. I know we had also talked a little briefly about me bringing up the FAFSA, some useful information on the FAFSA. So let me flip over real quick to that website. And I just kind of want to show you here as I navigate. So you can put in FAFSA.gov. That's all I have. And you can tell I've probably searched it or come to it several times. But it flips over to studentaid.gov, which is the correct place. And so, it might be a little updated compared to what I showed you. It's got students in the background getting ready to go to school. But you see this little pop-up here, which, it's a little automated virtual thing. But I always like to show students where you can go up here to the Help Center, and you click that. You can scroll down and get help, right? Call, email, or chat with a representative. So I always say, go to this Contact Us button. Typically, you as the student are going through this, but if you see here, there's a live chat option. And so you can get this chat going before you even get started, as well as you can give them a call if you want help. And these are all the things that they help with. But I think your biggest thing is going to be completing the FAFSA form in the process. It may even be creating that FSA ID, right? Maybe you want step-by-step assistance with that. Personally, I would probably call, just get a representative on the phone and say, hey, I'm getting ready to go through this, and I just wanted somebody on the line with me just in case I come across issues. And their hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time, which is pretty awesome because a lot of times, right, our business hours and things are 5 o'clock. Most schools, even my place of work with the state treasury office is 8 to 5. So if you called the customer care line right now, they're probably on their last call, but the call kind of trio or triage, I should say, is already closed, not accepting any more calls today. So this is a great resource to use the professionals because they can even click, kind of dig in and see where you physically are in the application while you're going through it and understand like where you're stuck and why you're stuck. And then you can see too here these Saturday, Sunday hours, 11 to 5. So on the weekends, they're even still open from 11 to 5 p.m., which is really awesome because they used to have very kind of standard business hours as well, that standard 8 to 5. And now they've stretched it out to helping in more of the off times when our parents are more available.
Very good, great. And we do have a few questions.
Yeah.
From people that are viewing from YouTube. So one of the questions is, I completed my FAFSA as well as Detroit Promise registration in December. I won't know if they accepted me until I graduate. So for Detroit Promise purposes, if you are a student that is considering a four-year university, the steps that you need to take now is to upload your verification documents. So once again, if you are going to a university, not a community college, then you need to upload your transcript in your college acceptance letter. And if you are planning on attending Michigan State and you have below a 3.3, then your test scores. So once again, if you are attending a university, please make sure that you are uploading your verification documents. That is the only way as of right now that we know that you are planning on attending a university. For the students that are planning on attending a community college, all you have to do, you're set for right now. Once you register, you created that password, you're all set. You do not have to upload any documents at the moment. We will be releasing in about like a week and a half the scholarship acceptance letter. That's the letter that lets us know, okay, this is my final decision for the school that I'm planning on attending, and this is where I want my Detroit Promise to be used at. This letter has not been sent out because we're still making sure that you all are finalizing your decisions and you're getting those verification documents uploaded. May 1st is usually decision day. So that's usually when students, have made that decision on what school they're going to be applying to. So expect the letter to be coming out around then once you all have made some of those final decisions. And then we can send your Detroit Promise information to that university or community college that you are planning on attending. But for right now, for your students, upload those documents. It's necessary. It's a necessary step for you to move on. And Felicia can answer the question about, FAFSA eligibility and not FAFSA eligibility, but how do you know whether or not your FAFSA was successfully processed and things like that.
Oh, let me see, because I was looking through.
Okay, this is the question right here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Oh, okay. So I would say definitely check your email for one. Make sure that you see a FAFSA confirmation email. Because oftentimes, surprisingly enough, students will often complete just their FSA ID and think that they completed the FAFSA. And so, the FSA ID is just one part of it. And really all that's doing is verifying your identity, confirming that you're a resident, and allowing you to create an electronic signature. So if you haven't gone through the FAFSA and put in like all this income information and come across questions that likely were confusing, like, what is this? What does this even mean? Then you probably didn't complete the FAFSA. So you want to make sure that you got to a confirmation page at the end, and you want to make sure that you got a confirmation page emailed to you. That confirmation page that's emailed to you would actually show you your EFC, which is that expected family contribution, as well as it would show you what Pell Grant eligibility you have and any student loan eligibility you would have. And then, so you would have gotten that confirmation email. You also would have gotten a processed email. And that usually happens about 3 to 5 days after your FAFSA is processed. And they're essentially just telling you, hey, we processed it, and now we forwarded that information on to the schools that you listed on your FAFSA. And so you could also call the school or college that you're intending on going to. You could reach out to their financial aid office and just say, hey, I want to confirm that you've gotten my FAFSA, and just inquire if there's anything else I need to do. I would even ask, are there any scholarship applications that I could be completing right now? Because a lot of institutions have those available, right now for incoming students.
Yes, definitely make sure you are checking with the college that you are going to see if they have additional scholarship, or even like I was just responding to one person. I know Henry Ford, they have like book stipends for certain students that, who are economically disadvantaged or you need money for things like that. Also, for the student that, as how do I sign into my Detroit Promise account and add personal documents? When you try to log in, it says that your information is still correct. I know that a couple students have been having, not a couple, a handful full of students have been having this issue. So unfortunately, with iPhones, there's something called prevent cross tracking. So if you go to your settings and you search prevent cross tracking and turn that off, then you should be able to log in. That's something that blocks certain cookies. If you know about technology, I'm not going to get that far into it, but all you need to know is if you have an iPhone, you're not able to log in and you're sure your information is correct, search in your settings or on your phone in general, prevent cross tracking, or just start searching cross and turn that off, and you should be able to log in. And that's for students that already have set their password and know their information is correct. If you haven't set your password, you would not be able to log in. You need to set your password after registering for the Detroit Promise. But that it has been an issue with iPhones with the new update is that prevent cross tracking. So turning that off should help you log in. And let me know. It takes a couple of seconds. So if you're able to do that before we hop off and your issue is resolved, then great. If not, email us, and I'll put our email up on the board. Or even if it's not, you can just ask another question. But I'll put it up so you can have our email if you're not able, and we hop off before then. Any other questions?
I do see someone says, how do you confirm the scholarship with the college? So are you specifically thinking the Detroit Promise Scholarship, or I guess scholarships in general? I guess I'll answer it generally. It doesn't hurt to reach out to that financial aid office. Personally, I would make a relationship with them. Reach out, hey, my name is so-and-so. I'm just checking the status on XYZ scholarship and wanting to know, if it's there yet. And, what is your school's process for ensuring that that scholarship gets there? Unfortunately, all schools kind of have a different process. Like, for example, I know when I was at Schoolcraft, for example, if it came to the TIP scholarship, the tuition incentive, or the Michigan Competitive Scholarship, if a student inquired, I could look to see if that student was there. I often needed the student's social security number. And so it was a nice over the phone thing that I could almost instantly look up, and I could tell a student oh, I see that you're in the system, but I'm currently blocked from being able to see it because you might have listed a different school as your primary, as the one you were planning on going to. So here's the number, which is the one I have on the screen here, that, you would call for any, my student aid specific scholarships, just to tell them, hey, I'm not going to such and such school. I'm going to this. And same thing sometimes with Detroit Promise, there might be a designated scholarship coordinator at their financial aid office that has a specific contact with the Detroit Promise. And so all they would need is possibly your name or your student ID number with them, and then they can follow up to confirm your status for Detroit Promise.
So, and just to add on to that about Detroit Promise. So as of right now, I don't know if you were on here, but if you are for your student, the first step is making sure that those verification documents are uploaded. So we know that you actually have been accepted to the school that you are planning on using the Detroit Promise at. Around May 1st is when we will be releasing our scholarship acceptance letter, which is, okay, that final decision, you letting us know, okay, this is where, I'm finally deciding to go and where I would like to use my Detroit Promise. The documents that you are uploading right now are for verification purposes, to verify that you're actually eligible for the scholarship. The scholarship acceptance letter lets us know, okay, this is where I actually want to send my scholarship to. In that process, like I said, that form is not coming out until May 1st. So you haven't officially confirmed your Detroit Promise scholarship yet. You're still in that process of doing that. So for your students, upload your documents. If you're having trouble logging in, please let us know. And then for community college students, you don't need to do that. Okay. And then I see we have another question. Everything has been processed. I received an email that my registration. Okay. If you were denied, will they email you? Yes, if you were denied through verification, then you will get an email immediately after verification. So when they're going through students, they're looking at your transcripts, your college acceptance letter, and if you're applying to Michigan State, those test scores. So once they look through those, then once they look through those, then they will press approve, or they press deny. And if they press deny, there will be a note there saying why you were denied. The only reasons why you will be denied is you didn't live in Detroit, you didn't attend a Detroit high school, or your GPA or SAT score does not align with the school that you're applying to. Outside of that, please rest assured that if you meet the requirements for the Detroit Promise, you will receive the scholarship. We are not a competitive scholarship. It's all about meeting the eligibility requirements for the scholarship. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Are you supposed to upload a transcript for all 4 years? Yes, it needs to be a cumulative transcript. So it needs to be 9th through 12th grade. Any other questions? And if there are any more questions, we give you a few more minutes to drop some in the chat. I'm going to put our email address, if I can find it, up here. Just type it. If you all don't have it.
I was going to say, one suggestion that I've seen definitely reward a good handful of students over the years is, I've often said, especially this summer, spend at least an hour a day doing scholarship searching activities. So, if let's say, 1 hour is, just you searching and finding a bunch of scholarships, open up a Excel spreadsheet, just search for scholarships, list their websites, their applications, save what you need to. Then, the next day you actually start working on those essays or whatever it is that they're requesting from you. And then, you just literally take each do for those different scholarships. Thank you for posting that there. But you do those different activities. And I've had several students come back to me at one point and say, I did what you said over the which is pretty amazing. I had one student, she had so many scholarships that she, just needed to understand, which ones to really accept and which ones to, not follow up on based on what her actual educational goals and needs were. And so I often tell students all the time, if you spend just that hour and you end up getting a scholarship, you've made more money than most people do in an hour.
Nyla, I'm so happy to hear that turning off the cross-tracking worked. If you know any other students who are going through that, or your friends, just please let them know to get that turned off. And then someone asked, how can I get my daughter's transcript? So your daughter can ask for the transcript from her counselor. If they have a college transition advisor, those are the people that they should be looking for to access their transcript. I also don't know if you all have something like Power School or that platform that you all use to access grades. She might be able to access her transcript through whatever platform that school uses. But ultimately, she can just ask her counselor for a copy of her transcript. Okay, someone asked, what if your GPA is lower, but you got into the school? Are you still eligible? So unfortunately, if the school's GPA for Detroit Promise is higher than the GPA that you were accepted to the school with, then you wouldn't be Detroit Promise. You wouldn't be able to use the Detroit Promise at that school in particular. Any other questions?
But be sure to ask the school if there's any other scholarship opportunities you can apply for.
Yes, definitely. Yes, if you're not Detroit Promise eligible, look for additional scholarship opportunities from your school. We talked about looking in your community. If you attend a church or if you work at, McDonald's offers tuition, like reimbursement things, Chipotle, jobs like that. So definitely
I know somebody had just mentioned Potbelly, and I want to say I saw something recently where that was one of their selling points now is like, hey, we can help with tuition. I don't know what it looks like, but it's still worth asking.
And these are things you can even consider while you're in school. So
Yes.
even if you're not working at these jobs right now, these things exist for at these jobs, period. So even if you, did decide to take up a part-time job at one of those corporate one of those businesses, then you can look at that too.
Yeah, I know like UPS, FedEx, all these different places that you could do work part-time definitely do offer scholarship opportunities, or tuition reimbursement is another one they call it, where, you either they pay ahead. So that's tuition assistance, or tuition reimbursement, meaning you pay, but then they pay you back, assuming that you passed your classes.
And I see you've asked a follow-up question, so you need a 3.3 cumulative GPA. No, so our schools, some of our schools are below a 3.0 GPA for Detroit Promise eligibility. All of our schools are test optional right now, so it's really looking at those GPAs. For Michigan State in particular, they're the only school that's not test optional, so they have some different variations for what your GPA can be. So if you have below a 3.3 GPA, then you would need to have a 1060 on the SAT or 21 on the SAT for Michigan State in particular. If you have a 3.3 or higher, then it's test optional. For all of our other schools, like I said, it's typically a 3.0 GPA, but at least 7 of our schools have gone below that 3.0 GPA. And I can drop the link in the chat for you all to be able to look at that full list of score and GPA requirements. Okay. I'm just pulling up this link for you all. But any other questions while we wait? I just joined. How can I check, or is it possible for me not to get fast? Okay, I think this might be a question for you. I'm gonna pop that on there.
All right. Let's see if anything does it. So what I guess I would say first is confirm that you got a confirmation page emailed to you. Make sure that you got a FAFSA confirmation that confirms that you've completed the FAFSA. So one way you can check is by just going to FAFSA's website and logging in. And if you haven't completed it, so let's say you're graduating this year, I assume you're all seniors. If you're graduating this year, then you would be doing the 22-23 FAFSA, because it's fall of 22 and then January of 23 that you're going to be attending college. If you log in and see that says that it's been completed, then that's processed. So now you just might be waiting to hear from the college itself. And you do want to make sure that you've at least applied to the college. So that could be also an issue. If anyone, even if it's a community college that has open enrollment, for example, and, they don't have a GPA requirement, you want to make sure that you've at least applied to the school, because they're not going to respond to you unless they have an admissions application on file. So hopefully I answered your question, because you mentioned not really receiving anything. But you should have definitely received at least that confirmation page from the FAFSA, as well as another email that confirms to you that they processed it, which means that they sent your financial aid information from FAFSA to the school. So hopefully that school, at this point has reached out to you or will be reaching out to you soon, because this is around the time that they would at least be giving you like tentative financial aid award letters.
And I know for some schools, after getting accepted, they sometimes send you a checklist of things that they still need to further your financial aid. So look out for something like that. And then also you suggested that maybe he can probably call the school that the financial aid department and just confirm whether or not they received it.
Yep. That's always a great idea too. Because when you call the financial aid office, you can always ask, is there anything else I need to do? Do you have that information? Is there anything else I can do, such as applying for scholarships? Where's your scholarship application at? How do I find it? And keep in mind that this isn't just to this year. guys. So you want to make sure that every year, not only are you applying for the FAFSA, but every year you're also looking for scholarship opportunities. Because once you become a freshman in college, you're eligible for freshman and college scholarships. Right now, you're a high school student, right? A senior in high school. So you're eligible for those specific scholarships, which is why I'm suggesting use this summer to apply for those senior or high school graduate scholarships, because you're only a high school graduate for the remainder of this year. Once you've attended some college classes, you're no longer a high school graduate. Now you're a freshman in college, and there's only specific scholarships too for freshmen in college. You're not eligible for the high school graduate. You're not eligible for sophomore in college scholarships. So if you kind of see the trend I'm making here is that every year you're a new classification of student. Thus, you're eligible for just a specific window of scholarships that's specific to you.
Okay. And we are getting ready to wrap up. Thank you all for all of your questions. If anybody has any last minute questions, please drop them in ASAP. If not, once again, I will just let you know our email address is info@detroitpromise.com. And you can comment any Michigan student aid information in the comments that you want to leave for anybody to follow up.
Oh, yeah.
Any resources or anything like that to let students know about.
I was like, I don't see that it lets me. I can do private chat though. It shows me.
Oh, it's no comment section for you at all.
No, but you know what? I can just
chat it
reshare.
to me. I'll drop it in the comments.
I was gonna say I can just reshare if that helps, because then that allows everybody to kind of take a screenshot if they want to.
And take this screenshot if you all have any. If you need to email or call Michigan Student Aid. No, it's not too late to apply for the Detroit Promise. And if you are interested in a four-year school, make sure that you're uploading your verification documents. You should have received an email if you were already registered about what that process looks like. But if you aren't registered, go to DetroitPromise.com and get registered for the scholarship.
Awesome.
Okay, if we have a full tuition to college, okay.
It depends on that scholarship. Because, for example, you know, if let's say all you have is Detroit Promise, I believe your FAFSA money would pay first, and then Detroit Promise would take care of anything after, specific still to tuition and fees. But that, you know, your Pell Grant or any other federal grants, state grants, those would all pay first. And then if there's any tuition or fees left, that's where Detroit Promise would help. So it depends on the rules of that scholarship.
So,
but like TIP, for example, you know, TIP would pay your tuition and fees, or well, tuition and then up to $250 in fees, assuming you go to your in-district community college and you're considered a resident, right? That could pay for your full tuition up to that $250 in mandatory fees. And then anything you get from Pell Grant then could assist with any remaining fees, books, supplies, room and board, if, you know, if that, is available, right? If that additional of FAFSA is there. But usually, you know, unless you have other scholarships and things, I've not seen like, you know, TIP be able to cover, and then, you know, and then you have enough Pell to cover housing. Usually you do need like other resources to kind of really help with that. Usually, you know, whether or not you've gotten any kind of Pell Grant, usually like right away, to be honest. If your FAFSA, you know, was completed and you got a confirmation, or you can even look at your confirmation page and it'll often tell you, you know, if you got Pell Grant, what your EFC number is. And then as well as any student loan eligibility that they foresee that you could be eligible for. They're not going to break it down like subsidized or unsubsidized. They're just going to tell you, you know, student loans this amount. But around that area, you should also see any Pell Grant if you're eligible for it.
So that's kind of similar to what she was just saying. So the Detroit Promise will cover your tuition and mandatory fees up to 4 years at a university, and then 3 years for a community college. So it's a last dollar scholarship. So your FAFSA, so your federal and state aid will be applied first. So if you're eligible for TIP or the FAFSA, that would be applied to your tuition first. And then if there's any gap that's left after that free money is applied to your account, then that's where the Detroit Promise will come in and cover it.
Yeah.
And it also depends on how much you get from the FAFSA for your Pell Grant too, because you might not get awarded the full Pell Grant. You might only get a partial award. So that will determine, what that gap is that needs to be covered in your tuition and mandatory fees after that is applied.
Yeah. And then I see someone mention, they haven't gotten any confirmation. So I would pop back into your FAFSA. I would log back into it and make sure that it says on there that it's complete. It could be possible that, let's say you signed it, but maybe your parent still needs to sign it, or maybe, there's something going on with their FSA ID that you were unable to sign it. And that's just the most common reason I've seen, a FAFSA not be considered complete, is just making sure that your parent signed it electronically. Or if they're unable for some reason to create an FSA ID, you can always print out a signature page and mail it in. But that does take an additional about 2-3 weeks. They've gotten pretty fast, but sometimes, just snail mail can take a little longer. Whereas if you sign it electronically, usually within 3 business days, it's telling you if you're good or not.
So someone says, what if you're not eligible for FAFSA or Pell? Are you still eligible for Detroit Promise? So when you say eligible for FAFSA, I'm assuming you mean like the Pell Grant in particular. So it depends. So you can be eligible for the FAFSA, to actually fill out the FAFSA, but not eligible for the Pell Grant and still be Detroit Promise eligible. And then for some students, they might not be eligible to fill out the FAFSA at all because of maybe citizenship status or something like that, in which they are not able to complete the FAFSA. So if you fall into that category of not being able to complete it at all, you don't meet the requirements to actually fill out the form, then you wouldn't be eligible for Detroit Promise. If you are actually eligible to fill out the form and you just don't receive any Pell Grant because of income, then you still would be able to use the Detroit Promise Scholarship.
Yeah, very similar to TIP as well. You do have to be able, unfortunately, but with TIP, you do have to be able to fill out the FAFSA. But it doesn't matter if you're eligible for Pell Grant. If you were eligible for TIP, you don't lose that eligibility essentially, unless you just decide not to enroll within 4 years, or you go to an ineligible school, something of that nature.
So you do not have to receive the full Pell Grant or be Pell Grant eligible to receive the Detroit Promise. You do need to complete the FAFSA, and they determine that Pell Grant eligibility for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All great questions.
Really, thank you all for your questions, for engaging with us on these platforms. We really appreciate it. And then, screenshot this information if you need it for follow up. Did you have any last comments? I thought you were about to say something.
Oh, I just say, any questions at all, definitely give us a call. Our customer care center are extremely helpful and knowledgeable. Even though they only have like those 8 to 5 hours, they're the people that are essentially literally just waiting for calls. So I say always give them a call. Whereas, sometimes specifically trying to get to me, I might be in the middle of things like this or out at schools. So, the difference between them and I is I'm on the road. They're they intake calls, they help troubleshoot, whether that's creating your student portal, dealing with lockout issues, confirming eligibility. They're able to do that essentially all through those 8 to 5 hours. And usually you're always with a person. That's also something that a lot of times people are skeptical of. You're afraid you're going to get some kind of automated machine, but it's always a person. And I've personally met each and every one of them. So they're all in-state Michigan people working in Michigan. So you'll never get an automated machine unless you're just, on hold. Then of course you've got that elevator music in the middle, and usually the wait time is like less than 5 minutes.
Great. So,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, apply for additional scholarships.
Yeah.
It never hurts to apply for additional scholarship. There's nothing wrong with having too much scholarship money, but it's important to pay attention to where that scholarship money is going and what certain scholarships say they can be allocated towards. Because some scholarships, like Detroit Promise, are just tuition. Some scholarships can be used for your cost of attendance in general. You might be able to find specific scholarships for books or book stipends. So looking for like the particular things that you might need, in terms of covering that full cost of attendance. So if your tuition is already covered and you only need to worry about, room and board, books and things like that, try to identify resources that are particular to those things. So you're not applying for additional tuition scholarships and your tuition is already covered, or you're not applying to scholarships where that money can be used for multiple, things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because I've definitely had students where they've had 4 or 5 different tuition-based scholarships. And it's like, when a scholarship committee makes the rules of, this scholarship is only for this scholarship, they can't reallocate it based on anything. They're to be consistent and fair, they have to stick to their rules. And it's even federal requirements when it comes to them giving money that in order for them to sometimes keep whatever nonprofit status they have or whatever, to be consistent. So, they can't make an exception for just one person. Essentially, they have to stay consistent. So make sure that, like Kristen mentioned, that you want to make sure you apply for what you need, or you're looking for something that's very open that says, for anything up to cost of attendance. So that means it can do tuition fees, book supplies, anything. It can literally do anything that the school thinks you need money for.
And definitely check out the scholarship search engine. I mean, I say search engine, but is it like a search engine?
Oh yeah, on our website.
Yeah, on your website. I dropped in the comments a little while ago, but I'm trying to find it again so I can put it back up.
Yeah, on our website, you're searching for your county, and based on the county you live in, we've identified all these different scholarships that you're eligible for. And so you should be able to see on there, just like I mentioned, a multitude of scholarships based on where you live. I wish I had this resource when I was going to college.
Even the Detroit Promise, I try to tell students, like, take advantage of this opportunity. There are people, who would love to have their tuition paid for, all of these great scholarship opportunities that are available. Apply for them all. Even if they require you to write a letter, write an essay, if it requires you to get letters of recommendations, just do the work so you don't have to pay for it, afterwards.
Well, and a lot of these are just life skills too. When you really think about it, I know right now you might be thinking like, oh, I got to get a letter of recommendation. But seriously, they're life skills. At some point when you're going from one job to another, you might need a letter of recommendation in order to get through that barrier of just getting your application looked at. And I can tell you from experience throughout all of the different moves I've had in my career, having a letter of recommendation from colleagues, even as far back as when I was in college, and they've been able to see my growth. And so they're able to speak on that really easily. I've seen Felicia grow in these ways, go from this career, this career path to this, she did, the more someone knows you too, the easier it is for them to write that letter of recommendation. So I've definitely had, whether it's peers or colleagues that are like, hey, would you write a letter for me? I'm like, you want to write it? And I read it and decide if I want to sign it, because if I don't know you well enough, how can I write this great recommendation,
And definitely, once again, I'll reiterate, look into your school scholarships. I got a scholarship once I got to college for being a student that had experienced time in foster care at the University of Michigan. I didn't know that scholarship existed before going there, but maybe if I would have did a little bit more research, asked them about, like, what are all the scholarship, opportunities that you all have, I could have had that my freshman year rather than just getting it my sophomore year. So definitely, and think about the identities that you hold,
Yes.
what have you gone through? What experience do you have? What are your interests? What fields are you going into? There's scholarship, for Black women who are interested in STEM. If you're underrepresented in that field that you're going into, they might have scholarships based around that. So definitely do a brainstorm about those different things, extracurricular activities, career interests, majors, to kind of help guide some of those scholarship searches that you are doing, because it can be hard to find scholarships if some of those searches aren't limited. So try searching by some of your identities or some of those things you're interested in. Okay.
And sometimes talking about the uncomfortable things, right? The challenges and things that have required you to have what they call grit, right? You pursue even though it's hard and you want to quit and it's difficult. Sometimes talking about those things, even though they might be a little triggering, can be very inspiring to a scholarship committee. It might be just the thing that gives you that scholarship versus somebody that's like, oh yeah, I struggled with this and it's something super basic. I struggled with organizing my schedule to go to work. Whereas, maybe you were babysitting your siblings and, helping, your single parent at home make more money, or, maybe you're co-parenting or how do I want to say, co-running the household, essentially, which is a whole different struggle, right? Than somebody who comes from what I call a nuclear family, which is the 2-parent household with, 2 parents, married parents who both have jobs, right? That's a whole different life experience.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, I wouldn't have even known about this opportunity if I wasn't candid and open with my academic advisor. Through that conversation is how she's like, I think you might be eligible for this program called the Blavin Scholars Program. She was like, and then we just talked. I gave her a little bit more information about me, and that's how I was able to get $5,000 a year added on to, the scholarship money. And the great thing about that program too, that money could be used for educational related expenses. So it didn't just have to be applied to my tuition or even, to my room and board. It's things related to educational expenses in general. So if I needed a laptop for school, to be able to do the work, it was things like that. So definitely, communicating with people when you are struggling, when you do need help, you never know what opportunities or resources they might have available to you.
Yeah, sometimes it's just literally having a conversation of, hey, can I meet with someone? And, maybe you're going to inquire about scholarships, but you're, have that quote unquote elevator speech, right? That like 30 minutes or, 10 minutes of this is who I am. These are my identities. This is what's going on or what's been going on in my life. And sometimes, those key words helps a financial aid professional go, oh, you know what? You might be eligible for something.
And I know for like University of Michigan, they have an extra scholarship profile that you complete. It's called like the CSS or something like that.
Yeah.
So if your
That's
school
actually required just for their institutional grants and scholarships.
So make sure if your school has a separate scholarship profile or application that you get that filled out because you never know, you might be missing out on some money.
Right.
Okay. But thank you all once again for joining. We are going to end the session now. If you have any questions, screenshot this so you can know where to follow up with. And then you all have our email address already and our contact information. You also can DM us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We'll respond there. Whichever way is the best for you all to communicate with us, just hit us up there. Thank you all. See ya.
Take care.